Hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today for an executive briefing on APQP, or Advanced Product Quality Planning. It appears to be a very timely subject. It's been around in the automotive space for a long time, but we have quite a few people internationally joining us, and a lot of people from the aerospace community, which just recently adopted the APQP process for their new product launch as well. A couple of housekeeping issues before we get started. The phones are muted, but we would encourage you to ask questions during or at the end of the presentation by simply typing them into the question box on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And if you'd like a copy of the presentation when we're done, just send an email request to us. I'll give you the email at the end of the presentation. My name is John Cachet. I've been working in the automotive and aerospace industries for almost 30 years now. Focusing on how to help companies align their business and technology in such a way that you maximize your people and the business processes they're trying to do. Have a lot of knowledge in the challenges that organizations have on new products launched, but not as much as my co-presenter today, Scott Gray. Scott's currently the Senior Program Manager at the AIAG Automotive Industry Action Group in the Quality Deployment Group, who's had a passion for APQP as a way to help companies get new products to market and lower their costs. But he's got some real hands-on experience as the Senior VP of Corporate Quality at Eaton, VP of Quality at Freudenberg, Quality Director at Borg Warner. I mean, Scott's been in the trenches for a long, long time, and I'm very happy he could join us today to share some of his lessons learned and what he's figured out as far as why this is working in some companies and not working in others. I heard Scott say this quite a long time ago, that if a company used APQP as a strategic business process, they could decrease the cost of poor quality and warranty. And of course, if you decrease the cost, you're going to increase your profits, but by a factor of 2x to 4x. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, a lot of companies, when they start looking at their net profits, especially publicly held companies looking at stock reports and net profits, you start increasing profits by a factor of 2x to 4x. That'll get any executive in any boardroom and any stockholder group very interested in talking to you. Just recently, as of May 7th, Ford Motor Company announced that they are reviewing the vehicle launch procedures. And you know, some of it's reactive, a lot of it's proactive, and Scott's going to tell you about some of the experiences in that area. But you know, major automotive OEMs, major aerospace OEMs are trying to figure out better, faster ways to bring new products to market. So what we're going to walk through today is Scott's going to share with you a little bit about the problem as he's seen it in the trenches. We're going to talk a little bit about some technology and some ways to help solve some of those problems. I was talking to a handful of people before today's event, and they asked me to demo the software a little bit, which I usually don't do, but I'm going to go in and just show you some of it. And then we can talk about next steps and answer your questions at the end of the event. So Scott, let's hand it off to you.
All right. Thank you, John. Can everybody hear me okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. So yeah, I appreciate the introduction, John, and looking at APQP and the new product development process. And within APQP, you start to pull in all of the what we call the core tools, the FMEA and the control plan. But really looking at that, hold on a second, John.
Oh, no, that's all right. I'll take it back. Sorry about that. My bad. Just tell me when you want to advance the slide.
Okay. Okay, so as we deal with quality issues, I've been with a number of major tier 1 suppliers going through leading the quality function. You can have regular production quality issues, but quality issues on new products generate a lot of concern at the customers. And it gets to be somewhat of a, I call it the doom loop. So you have some products that are late, they got some kind of a problem, quality's not quite there, we can talk about whether it was a validation test issue or a sub-supplier issue. But as soon as you have a new product development project and the quality is unacceptable and the timing starts to slip, what you do is you go pull your best and brightest resources from all your other projects. And then those projects start to suffer. They slip. Something gets missed. So then that next project has an issue, and you get into this doom loop where you're continually just kicking the can down the road. Problems are repeated because they're never looked at in a systemic approach for what's really causing this. Things are seen as individual, standalone product problems, and my experience is they're typically business process problems around the new product development and APQP business processes. Next slide, John. And as you start to go out into your organization, one of the things we typically see is that APQP is considered a quality thing. That's that standard that our customers said we had to use, or maybe in slightly enlightened sense, they go, well, it's not just quality, it's just quality in engineering. And engineering's got to develop the product, quality's got to do that paperwork. And in reality, it's an enterprise activity. It's a strategic business process. It's one of the most critical parts of growing your business effectively, organically on the new products. So if the organization doesn't own it, that's a huge issue. Product launch managers who, again, in different scenarios you see companies try to make the product engineer the project manager or the product launch manager. In a more progressive state, you find that, okay, the project manager is a standalone job, and that's a better state, but often they get reduced to a lot of clerical work as opposed to their big picture program management role, because the maintenance of the schedules and the task lists and the dependencies and the accomplishments for the gate reviews there's not a good way for the product launch manager to manage that stuff. So they get reduced to being a clerical activity, which then people don't want to do that job, and it's that much more difficult to put the right resources in. And then if you look at how things, if you start to dig into this drivers behind what went wrong, you find that project management is done with the wrong tools or people. So, again, in situations you go into, you find that resources are overscheduled, and not 110% overscheduled. They're 200, 300% overscheduled because you don't have visibility of all the different types of projects. The issues are not resolved, and that was something the president of the Americas for Ford, Joe Heinrichs, that was quoted in that earlier slide John showed. One of their things is they're trying to identify the issues and get in front of them. So if you have an issue management methodology that's not integrated with your project management, then you're always having to jump out, go do something separately, and those issues don't get in front of the gate committees and program management leaders as systemically and consistently as they need to. And one of the critical pieces is you don't really know your costs, or what you think they are off by a big factor, whether that's just resource costs for how many people did it really take to get that project done, the testing costs, the material costs. If you have to redo your prototypes 3 or 4 times because there was a validation test failure, do those get captured in the project, or because the prototypes were built in the plant is that a plant variance the plant has to deal with. You'd want all those costs to get captured by your project so you know what it really takes you to get these projects off the ground. Next slide. Just a little bit of definition here. Again, make sure we're talking about project management on a level field. Projects are the temporary undertakings, so this is not day-to-day running the business, that are accomplished by the organized application of appropriate resources. Now, you throw that definition up, half of you probably have the mute button on and you're laughing about what project did I ever get appropriate resources to get the job done? And that's a significant issue, again, especially if you look at not really having a handle on all the tasks that are involved. And the project management, in a holistic sense, is all the proposal of projects before they get approved, the planning and implementing, managing them through, evaluating them during the project and afterwards, combined with the leadership on how to manage all the people that are involved. So from my perspective, project management is a big company activity, not this piece of the business over here that just deals with getting new products out. Next slide. And the APQP project management, this wording and the diagram are directly out of the APQP manual. So it's a structured process, establishing and defining the steps and requirements to ensure that a new or changed product and process satisfy the expectations of your customer and the needs of your company. Now, a couple things there. New or changed is key. That's typically where you lose part of the visibility of your resource overloading. Those new products get segmented, but the iterative engineering changes or process improvement, internally driven process improvement, those changes are really mini APQP projects, and you need to combine the portfolio view with your brand new products to really understand the resource loading. The other piece there is we're not just developing a new product, we are developing a new process to make that product, and that process has to go through the same kind of steps. And again, often I've seen companies follow the part very specifically, but if you said, well, what equipment had to get purchased, or did we have to rearrange the factory to make room for that new line, in some cases those manufacturing issues don't get captured as well as they need to. Next slide. So then the challenge within the organization is to structure and manage all those components, people, material, resources, information, time, and money, to deliver a result that meets the requirements of the customer. And like a lot of you, some of this you learn from all the things that didn't go as well as you'd wanted them to on certain projects, whether that's not having all the right information, understanding that there's a program management triad around the resources you have, the specification that you have to hit, and the time it takes to get the job done, so that if somebody wants to cut the time, you need more people, or if you don't have clear enough specs, or they change during the course of the project, that's going to take the same people more time. And you really got to balance all those components to get the job done well. So when I started to do some compilation across all of my network in the automotive industry and look at what would people consider to be the best practices around APQP, the first one is this shared cross-functional business process. I always, when I'm talking to people about APQP, use the cross-functional teams working together deliver results. So this, you got to understand, it is a cross-functional business process. You can try to segment it out, but the best practice is that shared, owned company view of the activity. You need organizational clarity of the roles and responsibilities, the authority and accountabilities for the project and the process. The key piece here, I think that a lot of the folks on the phone can take note of is the process. So when we talk about best practices, just like you would manage your manufacturing process, you know what the tack time is supposed to be, you know what the yield is supposed to be, you know where all the control checks are at, and you monitor and report on the performance of that process. Very few companies monitor and report on the health of their APQP process. They could tell you a particular project is in phase 2, it's behind by a month and over budget by $10,000, but could they tell you what's the first pass yield of the 10 projects that are running through our process? What's the cycle time of the third phase of this process over our history of the last 2 years of all the projects that run through it? And that process thinking for APQP is where a lot of the continual improvement and taking it to the best practice level comes in. Companies that have an integrated master plan and master schedule for their APQP projects are among the best performing, so that they understand, and again, I know some of the companies on the call, your big tier 1 system supplier kind of companies. When you get a program, it's not a part. It's a series of parts. Could encompass different divisions of your corporation that have, perhaps slightly different views on who's in charge or who's the prime with the customer. And if you have the pieces and parts in separate planning methods that aren't tied together, a small minor piece could slip and affect the big schedule, and you might not see it. So this integrated master plan and schedule is critical. I mentioned earlier the risks, issues, and opportunities management. Issues are just risks that came to be, so you look at them in kind of that order of what are the things that could happen. Those are risks. Oh, they did happen. Now I have an issue. And I could leverage this to do something bigger and better. Those are my opportunities. Those things need to be integrated into the way you manage programs. Now, comprehensive change management, again, seems, 3 little words, relatively straightforward. But the product change issues drive a much bigger ripple in the project. So you could have a small engineering change, one part out of a 100-piece electromechanical assembly. One part could interrupt the whole schedule. So all the pieces and parts that are shifting around, supplier A from Korea, supplier C from Mexico, our plant, our other plant, all those pieces have to be integrated so you can understand what the small changes, how they impact the bigger project. Next slide. The next point here is around the phase review process, and most companies are using what's called a phase gate new product development process. So, and the model that we showed a couple of slides ago for the APQP definition out of the AIG manual. It has a built-in concurrent engineering model, but when people think about phase reviews, they often think about it, totally in sequence. Nothing in phase 2 can start until we successfully pass through the gate review at the end of phase 1. We all know that that doesn't really happen in real life, that there are some things that start early. The thorough and constructive phase review is really around are you going to get the money that you need in the second phase? You can start doing some of the tasks, but I'm going to release another lump sum of money, maybe some capital equipment money, maybe some outside vendor money, and the phase review process is where management says, yes, you have answered our questions, you're going to get your next lump sum of money. The other part of the constructive phase review process is for the leaders to realize that their role is to make life easy for the team, not to give more hurdles to the team, and to break down the barriers that the team is running into working this project through the company. And the more that there can be a clear understanding of that role in the phase gate review, the better. Clear and consistent communication of project status with all stakeholders is the key piece here is trying to get away from some type of reporting process that takes a week to put together a report that says where are our projects, and by the time you get that report together, it's already out of date. Then you go talk to an executive and say, well, here's our report for the end of May, and they go, well, but I know this fact that on one of these projects where it's moved past what you are reporting, therefore your report's no good. You really want to get something where people can go look at the status of the project in whatever system you're using to manage projects. So there's not a PowerPoint, Excel, week-long exercise to give project updates. I mentioned concurrent engineering. That's being designed or is designed into the process. Understanding there's a risk challenge there with the more you want to do concurrent, the bigger risk you're taking. So there are places where you could start things early, but depending on how risk averse your leadership is, they might not be supportive of that. Including supply chain management into APQP is a significant issue. One of the biggest problems the OEMs have told us at AIG, one of their biggest pain points in the entire industry is around management of the sub-tier suppliers. So from an OEM perspective, it's not the tier 1s, it's the tier 2s and tier 3s where their concerns lie. So an APQP project is a key place where that tier structure is exercised and stressed to its fullest degree, and then some. You're bringing in suppliers that are new to your process. In some cases now, after the downturn and the uptick in the industry and with the changes in technology, we're finding a lot of tier 2 suppliers are coming from other industries. So they're new to automotive as a whole, and then they're new to you as a supplier and your business process. So the more you can integrate them into the management of your projects, the better. And APQP supporting a learning organization culture and vice versa, a learning organization culture really supports a best practice around APQP where you look at the projects after they're launched and what could we have done better? Was it a training Was it a technical issue? Was it a supplier issue? And making sure that you look at those newly launched products and analyze them from a lessons learned standpoint to say, if that was a great one, let's do more like that. What do we do right? Or, hey, that one had a serious number of problems. What do we need to change on the next project? Next slide. The often missed piece of this, though, has to do with the team. And through my roles in the supply base, I've had a chance to directly lead some of the cross-functional business teams. However you do it, whether it's co-location or an e-community or some other way to ensure that they stay aligned, you've got to organize them to achieve timely and effective communication, coordination of their activities, and clear guidelines around what decisions are they enabled and empowered to make, and which ones do they have to get leadership approval to do. The more you can let the team understand and be empowered around decision making, the more successful they'll be. Communication within the teams, again, critical, and I use the term vertically and horizontally. So you need to look. You probably have multiple new product teams going on at the same time. They might be in the same plant. They might be working with the same customer. So they want to share things across projects. Depending on your organizational structure, if you're in a matrix organizational structure where you got a quality engineer, they're assigned to this project, but they still report solid line on an org chart to their quality manager, then you've got to understand that dynamic between the project organization and the functional organization. And the push and pull has to do with, what communication do we regularly report out? If we're more than X% behind, we have to tell everybody on a regular monthly basis. We have to give them this information. But periodically, teams are going to get asked, how are you doing? Our president's going to meet with the customer. He needs an update. Those type of updates. So you've got to be able to, the communication model has to be able to deal with both standard, normal, we release this out to a distribution list, and the occasional special request kind of pull questions.
The occasional special request?
Yeah, I tried to be flexible here. Again, looking at coordination, if you take project management and you've got a project team and they've got one new product project, that's tough enough. Again, in the size of companies that we have on the phone today, you've got hundreds of projects, which means there's thousands of activities. Many of them are interdependent. You only have so many coordinate measuring machine labs that are going to have to measure the parts in order to do your PPAP at the end of the project. You only have so many, supplier development resources that are out there doing supplier pre-sourcing audits. So those things have to be coordinated. And the complexity of those programs and the supply chain really increases the need for coordination. Again, if you're a 3 or 4 tier project with new suppliers and new parts being brought on board, you've got a global supply chain, way more complex than if you've got a North American only kind of supply chain. And again, I mentioned decision making, empower the team leader and the core team to make decisions on a timely basis, and then the phase reviews enable management to remove barriers, support the direction, and really have business discussions around the projects as opposed to trying to second guess whether a particular technical decision on a part within the project was the right way to go. Not that any executives would ever try to become chief engineering officers. So the real focus, and John and I were talking about this slide, is trying to look at helping companies take their APQP business process from wherever it is today to the best practice that they are shooting for an improvement. And as you go into the company and look around, we find a lot of problems are due to the people side of it. I'm not clear on what my role is, or I got this project that's was late when it started. We're working with a partner, third-party company that I don't know. I'm not comfortable with them. They're not being square with us. You get all those people issues, and what they look like is, if you step back, is that, wow, this part of the organization doesn't have a sense of urgency. They're thinking this is somebody else down the late phase is going to pull this one out of the fire. I know the parts aren't capable. I know the supplier's not capable, but we got it for a good price, so we're going to assume somebody else after it launches will fix it. They ignore the warning signs of the high warranty costs that John touched on earlier. And so the quote from Michael has a lot to do with just getting in the game, getting your hands on your process, taking a sense of urgency, and looking for those folks in your organization who have that competitive enthusiasm to take your APQP to a winning level.
Well, then the cool thing was, well, what would a solution look like? What if you did have some kind of process or infrastructure that would support this comprehensive process and did all the robust project evaluation planning that Scott was talking about, and had this multi-level work breakdown structure, and essentially gave you an environment to let your people do what humans do very well, and let the technology or software do what it does well, which is crank numbers and reports and track stuff. The organizational problem Scott talked about way at the beginning was, and this is just fascinating when you think about how simple of a problem it is, but resources are overscheduled. And as Scott said, 400% overscheduled. We got Scott allocated to do 320 hours of work this week. It's not going to happen. But unless you have this comprehensive environment, you'll never see that. Scott mentioned the issues aren't resolved. Well, where's your issue log? Where's your risk log? Where's your lessons learned log? So, as I promised, there's a couple people on today that I said I'd go live for a little bit, which we usually don't do. But let me toggle over to that real quick. So, what we're showing is a project management, portfolio management software platform, and what I defaulted on was the executive dashboard page, where you can see all the projects, what the phase or what gate they're at, and just the red, yellow, green indicators that we talked about. You could do first pass yield metrics like Scott talked about, basically building the ability for an executive to come in and see any component of a project at any level they want, but the also ability for individual project managers, anyone, to just build these templates, to build these dashboards, drag and drop ability, so I don't have to call IT. And this is that's why I made that comment about special requests. Scott wants to see it this way. Cachet wants to see it this way. Cami wants to see it that way. We should be able to just build dashboards that let them see it the way they want, when they log in, they only see what they want, versus us trying to recreate and redo those all the time. So if you look at, projects, the ability to go in and look at all the projects, the first one was, show me all my APQP programs. This data in here, and we'll go, if anyone wants a more in-depth demo of this, we'd be happy to do this. But, the idea, again, to see budget status, delivery status, resource status, the ability, of course, to go into the task detail. I got to pick a project to do that. We'll go into the Lambda project. So, of course, the ability to go in and see the detailed task, the ability to go up and down in that list, just show me the high-level gates, show me the detailed tasks. Of course, on any task, go in and click on it and see the detail of who it's assigned to, who's working on it, what kind of skills or resources do I need. This predecessor one that Scott related to, that there's all sorts of interdependency going on, and the ability to set up that interdependency not just in my project plan, but if the headlight guys don't get their stuff together, then the sheet metal guys can't do that, the painting people, and those are on all different projects. So again, this enterprise view that lets me set up those interdependencies across multiple projects, across multiple views. And again, the ability to see all those projects. I'm going to switch over to some customer implementation. The data files in here are a little bit better. And again, AIAG template, Ford's template, GM's template, Volvo's template, it doesn't matter. This essentially is an infrastructure that start looking at what's going on. So, the tasks that we showed you before, but the ability to get forecasts. And remember, the idea was I don't even know my true cost. In fact, sometimes when I do my first proposal, I don't know all the tasks. I don't know the start and end dates. And that's what frustrates a lot of people is, hey, we're going to do these 5 new launches. I need to know roughly how many people you need and what's your budget. Okay, well, we want the ability then to go in and develop, set up department or resources. Some people want to see it as full-time equivalents. Some people want to see it as, how many man days. But the ability to go in and look at that information without all the detailed tasks. In fact, the ability to look at the finance numbers on a particular task and go in and look at resource costs and how much we're spending and everything. And that's great if you're in charge of this project, but what if you're in charge of all the customer implementations? Well, then I want to be able to see all the costs. And these little clicks I'm doing that are bringing up this information is unbelievably time-consuming if you're outside of this type of environment. All right, let's see. That's the data view. Let's see the chart view. Well, John, I don't want to see cumulative. I want to see actual. Okay. Well, how's that compare to the forecast? Well, I don't want to see forecast dollars. I want to see percent of, all these clicks, depending on who you're talking to. I want to see it this way. I want to see it that way. We're just describing an environment that lets people represent data, information, present it the way that they want to see it, and have high-level planning. In fact, if we go back to the forecast, you know that there's multiple versions in here. Well, when we first started out, this is what we thought, but then we had a scope change. We did this. They dropped 3 suppliers. They added some. Okay, well, here's the next one. And the ability to keep versions of all those budgets and keep track of what happened, what was going on. Again, the high-level planning stuff. If we go back into the finance bucket for a minute, and we look at summary, I'll drill down into a particular task again. When we're looking at the forecast comparison, if I go into the data view, resource costs, total costs, the ability to go up and down, percent variance, percent value variance. These are the things that mess a lot of people up. In fact, the one thing that I really wanted to show, because Scott is spot on when he talks about this, is the ability to go in from a scheduling standpoint, and look at all my resources, look at all my engineers, and look at their utilization. And immediately, right between your eyes, you've got people that are overscheduled. They're not going to put in 150% of the schedule. Now, again, that's great to know, but what's really even more important is the ability to do something about it. So the ability to expand on Cachet's schedule and say, well, looks like he's taking some time off, he's got some activity here. Well, sorry, John, you're not going on vacation. But I mean, a vacation, I say half-heartedly, but it's not just the reporting. It's this one-click access to drill up and down to see exactly who's doing what. Hey, it looks like Adrian doesn't have any time up there. Let's take some of Cachet's work and give it to Adrian. And again, to just click and add from this thing, okay, Adrian, you're going to take this task. You're going to do this. Here's what we got to do. So again, the idea of looking at utilization, the idea of looking at these calendars and what's going on and scheduling people, which is really good from the high level, but I also want to make sure that what we really have to do, and if you remember Scott's comment about people and activities, what they're doing, we also want this My Work tab, where when I log in, I've got 10 risk mitigation issues I'm working on, 5 more overdue, I got 3 issues to resolve, this is my calendar for this week. These simple ways of looking at a very personal level. Well, what are the overdue risk mitigation items? Again, single click. Oh, that's what it is. Do you want to update them? Click again. So the ability to have, and Scott, I think your term was, looking up, looking down, looking across. The ability for people to look specifically at their task and what they're doing, their assignments, of course, emails on assignments. In the platform is also like a Skype chatter mode, where, hey, Scott, did you ever get that tooling resolved over at the supplier? I'm trying to update it. Yeah, I got that type of environment solves those issues about I know if resources are overscheduled, I can go in, I can reassign those schedules, I can look at utilization, I can look at capacity, I know what issues are resolved and not resolved, and if you want to see the cost, you know all the true costs of the project. So again, today's intent wasn't necessary to go through a whole bunch of detailed software, but I did promise some of the people I'd show it. If any of you are interested in seeing more about that, let me know. I'd be happy to go through and put your project into it, your task, your deliverables, show exactly how it can help you. But we do have time for some questions before we run out of time for today. I'm trying to paraphrase this. Oh, how does the system support capturing and sharing of lessons learned? If I go back to the app real quick, if you go into projects, each of the project has a communication tab. And you can have multiple types of communications, met with this, did this, and this. But you also have one that can be tagged. And by the way, these are all user definable. But you can have ones tagged as lessons learned. And remember, Scott was trying to articulate that, things that we learned in this particular one, whether it's good things we learned or bad things we learned, if we have an ability to stand back as an organization and say, okay, on the next launch, be careful of this, don't do that, but all in the same app. That doesn't mean I have to get out of this app, go over to some CRM app, or go somewhere else. I'll keep it in the same place. All right, somebody said, tell me more about the deliverables tab. Basically, throughout the app and throughout the project plan, you can define deliverables that have to be done. Again, the timing of them, assignment of them, but the question is, can you do attachments? And the answer is yes. If you have supplier qualifications, R&R studies, PPAP, I mean anything, if you define a deliverable, you can attach those. You can audit those if somebody changed them and what they did, and again, you can set up dependencies on those. So, yeah, the infrastructure we're showing you enables to keep track of all the documents as well.
Yeah, let me jump in right there, John, because one of the great benefits here is once you set up your company's particular project management phase gate model, then you define the the key deliverables, and if your company has a particular form for a financial review, then you can insert the blank document into a template of this project. Then when you go to start a new project, you clone the project, and that blank template is there. Then you fill out the template. That's the task. It's attached in so everybody on the project can see that deliverable, and then it stays in the project as in that repository. So you really get the benefit of it keeps all your what are the forms and things I have to do along the way, and then it's your repository as well for now that I've done them, people, for the next year, however long this project takes, they're going to be there for people to see and look at.
Well, it's interesting, Scott. I mean, I know in your Tier 1 roles you wrestle with this. The question is, I'm just curious what you guys did. Basically, it says, our internal APQP process is standard, but we have different requirements and unique customer requirements for each deliverable. How did you deal with that?
Right. So I think you could, once you have your standard model template set up, then you clone that for OEM A. You put in their specific documents. You could go back to the base, clone it again, and call it OEM B, put in their customer-specific requirements, and now you have essentially, a new template for every OEM customer. So when you get a new part for that OEM customer, you can just open it up, and all those customer-specific requirements would be there. Now, again, as you go down in the tier structure, you understand that there's OEM customer specifics, then there's the Tier 1 customer specifics. So if you're a Tier 2 supplier on the call today, you're going, yeah, I really get those, the combinations and permutations of customer specific requirements can be pretty daunting. You literally could create a different template off of your standard business process and have that stuff in the system and live, so there never would be somebody going, oh, I have to go remember to pull the OEM, the Dearborn OEM version versus the, downtown Detroit OEM version of this deliverable. So the system really provides the ability to set up those customer-specific models within the system.
And again, as you said, you just go up here and hit the clone button, and I've got a new project. And we got time for one more question, and this one really isn't an easy one, and it's not necessarily software related, but I think you hit a sore spot with some of the people today, and some of them are some of the Tier 2s and Tier 3s. Weren't you telling me about a major OEM that was taking kind of a different approach that wasn't, they didn't want to force a specific APQP task, gate, phase deliverables on the supply chain, but they're trying to understand your best practices? Or did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, well, there's, so again, in the APQP, FMEA, PPAP, those manuals are called the core tools. So those are all standard for all the OEMs, and then they add their customer-specific requirements is the term on top of that. The industry came up with a model for managing sub-tier suppliers. So the AIG guideline is called CQI 19 around sub-tier supplier management. Some of the OEMs then decide between ISO TS and the other kind of industry guidelines that AIG manages, they start to step boldly out and say, well, this is such a good guideline, we quote-unquote strongly encourage all of our suppliers to use it. And strongly encourages, that's the right term, until you have a quality issue get to that OEM during a launch. And then you don't get the strongly encouraged, you get the thou shalt version of go use this thing.
All right, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, again, if anyone wants a copy of the presentation, just send me an email, jmc@pproso.com. I do appreciate the folks that ask questions. That always makes it easier on the presenters to kind of make sure we focus on what you want. If you want to see any other webinars, they're at our website. But most importantly, again, we usually don't go into the software in these presentations. I tried to get you intrigued a little bit, but if you're looking for a way to engage your people more efficiently, to define and implement a process consistently across your organization, and again, Scott was spot on. Your organization may be $1 billion global multi-business unit, that's tough. But more importantly then, to engage the supply chain. There was one other question, but I didn't have time necessarily to go through it, but this platform a supplier can log in just like one of your employees. All the security, all the roles are there and everything. But again, thank you very much for your time. Let us know if we can be of any assistance to you, Scott. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. It's always great to hear from somebody who's been there, done that, and shares with us what he learned the hard way. And I appreciate your time as well.
Glad to do it, John.
Thanks, Scott.